how's it going, everybody? Welcome into a brand new Fantasy Roundup episode. Spencer the Guru Urquhart here, bringing it to you live from New Orleans. Gabe Henderson, live from Texas, repping his Astros there. How's it going, man?
It's going good. We're getting into the little section of the year where either fantasy playoffs are starting for those who got 2 week playoffs, or we're just on the brink. So being able to clinch in a few leagues this week when I woke up was kind of nice.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, I had a few. I don't think I've clinched yet in the listener league. I'm close. I'm close in our Bayou Vets Fantasy Roundup listener league because I had a huge week this week. Finally got my team back where it needed after a 5-0 start. I've been kind of struggling, but yeah, I know a lot of y'all just do the 2 or 3 week playoffs, weeks 15, 16, 17, or 16, 17. But yeah, I guess there are a few that are starting already as far as playoffs, but definitely a chance to at the very least lock in your spot.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, we'll have all that and more here on Fantasy Roundup. Got a lot of news to discuss. We'll get right into it here with our latest fantasy headlines. And actually, before we get to that, let's shout out our sponsor, Caesars Sportsbook. Make sure to head on over to Caesars. Get that risk-free first bet if you haven't signed up already, because if it doesn't win, you get it back as a bonus bet. So do that if that's something you're interested in over at Caesars. So headlines here: Jonathan Taylor to undergo thumb surgery. That was just announced. Good timing as far as, well, not good timing for Taylor, but good timing for us, being that it was just announced right before the show, because before the show it was kind of unclear how much time Jonathan Taylor would miss with the thumb injury, but now it's clear that he's undergoing surgery and will miss 2 to 3 weeks at least. So we'll have more on that here in just a bit. Zack Moss now very much back in the discussion there as the Colts lead running back. Vikings activate Justin Jefferson from IR. He won't be able to play this week because they're on bye, but should be good to go for week 14. The Vikings decided to be extra cautious with Jay Jettis. Probably could have used him last night considering how badly they performed against the Bears, but they'll go into their bye and hopefully have him 100% for the stretch run. Saints wide receivers Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are questionable. The injuries are piling up for the Saints. We knew it was coming. Well, here it is. Saints fans can't ever have a year where they don't deal with a lot of injuries. So Olave and Shaheed. Olave dealing with a concussion. Shaheed dealing with, I believe, a quad injury. Both, I'd say, on the wrong side of questionable right now. But you never know. They might take a turn for the better. I'd say Olave probably has a better chance to play this week than Shaheed. And then, of course, Michael Thomas on IR. So stay tuned for the waiver wire segment. I actually have a New Orleans Saints pass catcher on that list. That could be a big play, a big bye week fill-in this week. But that's another thing. 6 teams on bye week. That's kind of rough. So definitely a week that you have to be scanning the wire unless you're one of the lucky ones. And then Panthers, the Carolina Panthers, that train wreck continues. Frank Reich is fired. David Tepper, the owner, had a press conference today. Or was that yesterday or today? Something that organization is a dump. I know you had to go through it with the Texans, Gabe, but just be glad we're not covering the Panthers right now. Ooh-yah.
Yeah, exactly. Us fans in Houston are kind of hoping that they bring in Bill O'Brien. There's been some chatter there about, he's got experience with Bryce Young. But yeah, I mean, you got to feel for Bryce Young. I know he's not been as good as CJ Stroud. Obviously, as a Texans fan, I'll be the first to admit that. But, you got to feel for the guy. His only weapon is Adam Thielen. They can't get their running game going. Their offensive line stinks. They've got a coach who's or a former coach now who's absolutely clueless. So I think, they've reached a point where they've got to get this next hire right. And, I've heard a lot of talk about young guys in Carolina, but they just need to get an experienced head coach, someone to really steady that ship over there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you don't want to screw it up and hire like a Lovie Smith type coach, because then that not only pisses off the fans, it really stunts Bryce Young's development. It's one thing that the Texans were doing, that being that they didn't really have their quarterback of the future, but now that they do and have the head coach to go with it, things are really looking up. Carolina has their QB of the future. Yeah, I still believe in Bryce Young as well. I think he's just been dealt a really bad hand. I'm not blaming any of this on him. I mean, maybe a little bit. I mean, he hadn't performed well, but if he had a foundation like C.J. Stroud does, I think he'd be a lot better. So we'll have to see what they do. But yeah, Tepper, the owner there, he's getting a bad reputation. He's gotten to become one of those just clown show owners there. And as a Saints fan, I don't mind, as just someone covering the Saints, got to keep bias out of it now that I'm with the NOLA media. But as far as the Saints, it's just from their perspective, it's good to see Carolina struggling because it's just, it's they are just, because as much of a clown show as the Saints are, at least you're like, well, at least we're not the worst. I mean, Carolina right now, just a total disaster. But enough about that. Let's talk Jonathan Taylor, who's set to undergo thumb surgery. Get back on track here on the Fantasy Roundup. Get your questions in, y'all. Live Q&A segment coming up. So if you have any trade questions, bye week fill-in questions, flex questions, waiver questions, make sure to get them in here live. And the next, we'll be answering them here throughout. We'll be live probably for about another 30 minutes or so. So get them in now, y'all. Jonathan Taylor, though, expected to miss at least 2 to 3 weeks undergoing thumb surgery. And before we get to Zack Moss, Gabe, my first reaction to this was, man, Jonathan Taylor is becoming injury prone. He was a player that, when he first came into the league, looked like he was on the few dependable running backs. Now this is the 2 years in a row where he's missed. I mean, at this rate, he'll probably only play like 8 or 9 games. It'll be the second year in a row of that.
Yeah, and Spencer, the one pressing question I had going into this, if the Colts fall out of playoff contention, right now they're in a spot, but they're barely hanging on with teams like the Broncos and the Texans right up behind them. If the Colts are not in a playoff spot and not really in the hunt by the time Taylor's good to go, you got to wonder if they just sit him out for the rest of the year.
That's a good point. Yeah, they might just shut him down because, we'll transition to Zack Moss here. To me, Zack Moss is back, y'all. Zack Moss is back to being a must-start running back because when Jonathan Taylor was out, Zack Moss was killing it. He could make a case that he was even better than JT early in the season. JT's been solid since his return. He hadn't been a bust, but he also hasn't been like the elite producer that he was 2 years ago when he led the league in rushing. But Zack Moss, he's back, y'all. I mean, there's not going to be any competition there without Taylor. It's just going to be all Moss. He's probably going to get 30 touches a game or close to it here down the stretch. And if JT gets shut down, like you said, Gabe, then Zack Moss, if you have him, bravo. I'm glad I kept him in a few leagues. But if he's somehow still on your waiver wire, go get him because he's going to be a league winner, I feel like.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, as you mentioned, he's a must start. It's not like he's been injured this whole time and he's just coming back. Zack Moss has still gotten touches, so he's fresh. He's ready to go.
Yeah, definitely, because he's been in a reduced role, but if anything, that's probably helped preserve him as far as having a chance to have a big stretch run because he'd have been having the big workload all this time. He might be kind of worn out by now, but with Taylor back the past month or so, it's giving him time to recharge, averaging probably about 5 to 6 touches a game during that span. But now that he'll be back to being a workhorse, that's what you want for fantasy because there's just very few workhorse running backs, man. I was thinking about that last night. I mean, trying to rank the top 12 running backs moving forward, it's a crapshoot. I mean, other than McCaffrey, there's seriously very few backs. I mean, ETN even hadn't been as good lately. Kamara's really good, but outside of them and maybe a few others, I guess Bijan now is starting to do better, but it's Eckler's been treading water. Saquon's on a horrible team. Pollard hadn't lived up to the hype. Swift's kind of coming back to earth. The Lions guys are good, but they're in a committee. There's just hardly anybody you can trust.
Tell you another name along with Zack Moss, and I know he'll be rostered a lot. A lot of people kept him on IRs. Kyren Williams. I didn't know. I was intrigued to see how he performed. Didn't know how he returned from injury, but he didn't miss a beat, Spencer. He looked the part the other day. Even though the Rams, aren't a great team, they're getting those weapons back. And, it looks like they're still going to compete week to week. And I think Kyren Williams is a must start if you've got him.
Right, and that's good news for those that have held on the Cooper Kupp or had traded for him a few weeks ago, and I recommended it back when he was kind of a buy low candidate because after he got hurt the week before this one, I was like, oh man, I was like, that was a bad recommendation. He's going to end up shut down. But I mean, he's back now. He hadn't really blown up yet. But I mean, the Rams are definitely still in it. I mean, they're not in great shape, but they're going to keep fighting. And if they're going to keep fighting, then Cooper Kupp's going to be in the mix. He's still got some juice. So yeah, I'm excited to see that. It's just a fun offense because with Sean McVay, it's like, they're gonna sling the rock and they're gonna run a lot of plays there. Like they're gonna they're a fantasy friendly offense when things are rolling. Another running back that's like been better lately is Josh Jacobs. Seems like the new coaching staff there for the Raiders has helped him get sparked.
Yeah, the new coaching staff, Antonio Pierce, I think when he took over, he was asked, who are the two leaders of this team? And he said, if I was going into an alley with two guys, one of the guys that he said he would take is Josh Jacobs. So I think that speaks volumes to his role going forward. And as you said, he's really, taking that workload and run with it.
Yeah, most definitely. Any more thoughts on the Colts backfield before we move on?
No, I think one more thing just on the Colts in general, not necessarily the backfield. They've still got some guys. We were skeptical about the Colts coming into this year, obviously, especially once Anthony Richardson went down. But they've got some guys in Pittman, Downs, and now Zack Moss, who I think are still viable plays. And, if you need a quarterback, you could definitely do worse than Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Minshew himself hadn't been too good for fantasy, but he's got weapons around him that get the job done. Yeah, especially Pittman, because it's kind of one of those things. If you got Pittman and Downs, cool, but outside of them, they don't really have much. Their tight end room is pretty sparse. Like they've got a lot of guys, but none of them do anything hardly statistically. So, you just go with the ones that are putting up numbers and enjoy it, because I'd rather an offense that's a little more concentrated, because at least with that in, who's going to be putting up the numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's move on to our listener league update here. Shout out to all the listeners here. It's been a very, very competitive league, as evidenced by these records. Pretty much everyone still in the hunt here. Mike was our highest scorer this week. Took down the first place Latino Heat Hank Trill. A big statement win there, Mike. Now moving into second place. He's trying to make his charge for that listener league title. And the prize to go with it, those Saints-Falcons tickets, which are looking like that game's probably going to end up deciding the NFC South. Saints and Falcons tied for first. So there's that. So that prize still up for grabs. I took down Troy this week. Sorry, Troy. My team was due for a big one. And yeah, over 170 like that here down the stretch. Back to 7-5, or improving to 7-5 like that. That went down. I got a lot of buys this week, though. I might be in trouble this week, but I think I've got enough of a cushion to sneak into the playoffs. We'll have to see, though, because Joseph's now back in the mix. The Bayou Bandits took down Bucktown Rebel Jr. They improved to 5-7. Gabe back in the win column this week. Gabe took down Uncle Big Nick, who was trending up, but is now struggling without Joe Burrow. Salmon back at to 500, took down William, whose team's been kind of struggling lately. Very close matchup there. Both those two still very much in the mix, so at 6-6. And then the original Saints fan gets a win. He had been struggling, but took down the Bucktown Rebel. Playing spoiler there. Bucktown was looking to position himself for a repeat, where now he's a little vulnerable there at 6-6. Could still make the playoffs. Not out of it by any means, but just goes to show that this league, even the teams that people had written off are making moves. So yeah, shout out to my dad and everyone. But this league is all 12 teams are heavy hitters. Everyone competes. Everyone goes to war. So yeah, well, we both got a win though, Gabe. So I was happy about that.
Yeah, I can kick my feet up a little bit. I'm one of three people. Shout out to Mike and Latino Heat. Three of us have clinched the playoffs so far. So gonna kind of kick back and see over the next few weeks who's going to join us in the playoffs. I'm excited.
Right. Yeah, hopefully I'll be one of them. Thinking I will be, but not clinched yet. Going to have to probably win at least one more. Josh, actually, we'll get to that next year. Our live Q&A. We'll do a quick live Q&A here before we get to waivers. So anyone with, as we see here, questions we have about trade, start, sits, the waiver wire, etc. He says, do you think Aaron Jones plays this week? And do you think JT is actually back in 2 to 3 weeks?
You know, we talked about the JT one earlier, so I'll hit on that quickly. It all depends on the Colts. If they're still competing, then I think definitely. But if they lose these next 2 to 3 games, and I'd say, leaning on 3. If they lose their next 2, I think he'll still come back. But if he's out for 3 weeks and they lose all 3 games, I think they'll probably shut him down. That would be my guess. Obviously, that's just going on a hunch. Nothing credible to report there. As for Aaron Jones, I'm not sure. I would lean no. His injury seemed a little more than a week-long injury back a few weeks ago, and he didn't practice today, so it'll be intriguing to see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we touched on JT earlier, Josh. Yeah, I mean, I would think the Colts, as long as they're mathematically in it, they'd bring him back, and they're now, I think, 7-5, 6-5, like
So
6-5.
6-5.
Yeah, they had a bye already. Okay, because yeah, I feel like if they go on a big losing skid, I mean, I wouldn't say he'll definitely be back in 2 to 3 weeks, but I'd probably lean yes. I'd say more like 3 weeks though. I'd say by week 16, assuming they're mathematically alive. And then as far as Jones, I'm gonna say no. I mean, he's had a rough year with injuries. He's at an age. He's almost 30, and when you get to that age as a running back, it's hard to depend on running backs at that age. So I'd say Aaron Jones at this point, if you have him, stash him, but don't count on him. If he's one of your top running backs, then I would look to, if your trade deadline pass, just stay hungry on waivers, just like if Keaton Mitchell's still there, Zack Moss somehow still there. We'll have a few we'll get to on our waiver segment. So if you have options there on the wire, just keep active, because Aaron Jones, I don't trust him one bit. I mean, his dude even when he has played this year, he's just been kind of whatever. I mean, the Packers been more pass first with Jordan Love. So, yeah, I'm not going to be counting on Aaron Jones moving forward.
Yeah, and to that point, I wouldn't count on A.J. Dillon either. If you've got him this week, they've got a tough matchup in the Chiefs. So I would just avoid Green Bay's backfield at all costs.
For sure. So, let's for even more waiver wire options, let's get to our week 13 waiver wire. I'll kick it off this week. And at quarterback, it's pretty rough, y'all. Kenny freaking Pickett is my option for this week, because there's 6 teams on bye, and he plays the Cardinals. The Cardinals suck, especially on defense. They're a little better on offense with Kyler back, but they can't stop anyone. I mean, they let the banged up Rams just railroad them last week. So new OC there in Pittsburgh. Pickett showed a little sign of life last week in a fairly tough matchup against Cincy. I think this is a week to where they just kind of stick it to Matt Canada. I think the Steelers, I'm not saying they're going to fix their problems long-term this week, but I think temporarily this is a great get-right spot for that offense.
Yeah, for sure. They had a lot of yards last week, and eventually those are going to turn into more points, especially seeing as they play a significantly worse defense this week. So,
yeah, the only concern would be, I mean, if Najee and Jalen Warren take over, it might not be much for Pickett. But I think the Cardinals, they know the Steelers run the ball. They're going to try to force Pickett to beat them, and I think he will. As we'll see in Best Flex, I have one of their receivers is my best flex for this week. So, yeah, I'm all in with the Steelers. Know they've struggled, but when the matchup's right, you got to take advantage. So, running back, I got Roschon Johnson. He doesn't play this week, but there's just not much available at running back. If you're really desperate for this week, maybe try Michael Carter. He might get some garbage time against the Steelers there, and that matchup could be a higher scoring game than expected. But unless you're really desperate, I wouldn't mess with that. I'd go with Roschon and stash him, because he took over as the Bears' lead runner last night. He caught some passes. Khalil Herbert was, I'd say, phased out, but he was the number 2. Roschon was their main runner there, and I mean, they were winning most of the game. So that tells me that this is the script they plan to go with. And they're young. I mean, that's a young team. Roschon's a rookie. So I feel like they're going to want to give him as much work as possible. And I know they won last night, but it's still a lost season over there. So I feel like Roschon's someone that has yet to scratch the surface of what he can do. I think he can't do it this week, but weeks 14, 15, the stretch run, like, I think he's someone that could be a sneaky flex play down the stretch.
Yeah, definitely. Props to you, first off, for watching that game last night. I know you and I were probably the only degenerates for watching that. But yeah, Roschon Johnson, he's been someone who over the past, over the course of the season, really, who when he's healthy, he's looked pretty good when running the ball. And, I think the Bears know what they have in Khalil Herbert. I think, even though you mentioned they got the win last night, I think it's really time for them to just explore what they have in their young guys. And Roschon Johnson is one of those guys who could definitely be a contributor in the future for that franchise.
For sure. And Josh, ask those again, bro. I don't see any trade questions. All I see is your Aaron Jones question. So we'll get after our waiver segment, we'll answer those. Just please type them in again. My bad, bro. It's probably a technical issue with our streaming service, but I'm sure if you type it in again, it should work. So thank you for being flexible there. So Jonathan Mingo is my receiver. Only 7.6% rostered. Panthers have revamped their offense now. Frank Reich's out of there. And it seems like Mingo lately has been the guy that Bryce Young's been leaning on. Adam Thielen was that early. I'm not saying Thielen's going to get completely phased out, but I think this new play caller is going to want to feature Mingo because he's their future. Panthers, as I say with the Bears, I mean, it's a team that they're looking ahead. They're looking to see what they've got. And they're gonna want to see if Mingo is someone they can count on moving forward. He's a pretty high draft pick. He's been not great, but I think he's someone you can pick him up, stash him, maybe flex him this week if you're desperate. They got a good matchup against Tampa. And if he's someone Bryce Young keeps getting comfortable with, I think he could be someone to possibly start down the stretch. So to me, he's someone that's definitely worth taking a flyer on, considering that offense has nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, it's intriguing. Mingo's been one of those guys that we've kind of kept an eye on all season, and he's just really never taken the ball and run with it, to say. I think the Panthers' offense is going to get more creative. I think both he and Thielen are going to get a lot more of the ball. Thielen only had 2 targets last week, which I think is one of the main reasons that Frank Reich got fired, because he has been a sensation for them recently. Just throughout the season. And, it's absolutely useless. I know you saw it, Spencer. 4th and 6, down 7 with the game on the line. Frank Reich dials up a play to throw behind the sticks. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. So just to kind of come full circle here, I think Mingo, the only way is up for him, and I think the same for Thielen. Although if you've got Thielen on your waivers, then I'd be astonished. He's definitely owned in more than 30% of leagues. So Mingo is a guy to look at.
Yeah, because Thielen was the one guy that was actually putting up good numbers there, where no one else was doing anything. But with this new system, it might make it to where both Thielen and Mingo could do something. So a tight end, yeah, hopefully so, because that's a dump. But for Bryce Young's sake, hopefully they can turn it around. Would hate to see his talent go to waste. Tight end got Juwan Johnson, and this is one I had teased it earlier with the Saints having all those receiver injuries. Juwan Johnson became Derek Carr's go-to target down the stretch last week against Atlanta. I mean, it wasn't very effective. The Saints' offense was a disaster, especially near the red zone, but playing Detroit this week, probably going to be chasing points. And I feel like Juwan's going to be heavily involved, him and Taysom, because the receiving core is extremely inexperienced. I mean, the starting 3 most likely will be A.T. Perry, Keith Kirkwood, and if they elevate him from the practice squad, Marquez Callaway. I mean, what the hell is that? Oh, yeah, and Lynn Bowden. Forgot about Lynn Bowden, but he's...
I forgot about Lynn Bowden, Kentucky legend, Spencer.
Right. Yeah, but that's the whole Kentucky legend, not an NFL legend. So, yeah, it's dire straits over in NOLA as far as the receiving core goes. But Juwan Johnson, someone that will probably be forced to shoulder a lot of that load. I could see him getting 8 to 10 targets in this matchup. Detroit, not the easiest matchup, but their defense isn't elite. I mean, they just got gashed by Green Bay. So their defense is capable of being scored on. So I'm thinking for PPR leagues, Jawan's a good option because I mean I almost put A.T. Perry on here, but just can't trust A.T. Perry right now. I mean he freaking he made a huge mistake that led to the Derek Carr pick 6, and I think he'll get to play a lot, but has he really earned the trust of Derek Carr? It doesn't seem like it. Where Jawan Johnson, someone that's been with the ones most of the year, had some injuries, but he's healthy now. One of the few healthy bodies left in that room, so I think he's a good play this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. When you just ran through the Saints receiving depth for this week, as someone who owns multiple shares in dynasty leagues of A.T. Perry, that's music to my ears. But no fan base wants to hear that those are the top guys. So I think you're right. I think Juwan Johnson is going to get a lot of targets this week because as you said, the Lions are going to jump out in front pretty early, I think, and the Saints are going to play catch up.
Yep, that's what I'm thinking too. So we'll see how that one goes Sunday at the Caesar Superdome. So it should be an interesting one. That would be one. The Saints could win that. They'll get a lot of the haters off their back. But if they don't, well, that'd be 3 straight L's. And so the haters will not go half off on the hating like Honey Badger asked them to do yesterday on Cyber Monday.
Yeah, I mean, as you said yesterday, and Jim, I know Jim feels this way too. It's almost better if the Saints don't make the playoffs because who wants to really watch them go get curb stomped by Dallas?
And they wouldn't get as good of a draft pick, but we'll have more on that Thursday on Bayou Bet. So, Gabe, your waivers, man, you got Bryce Young believing in the new system there.
Yeah, and it's not just rookies, but quarterbacks in general tend to do better when too tend to do better when there's a change of coaching. And let's be honest, the Panthers have a favorable matchup this week in the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers give up the second most passing yards to opposition in the NFL. And so if there's going to be a week where Bryce Young puts up some numbers and bounces back from the skid that he's been on, I think it could be this week. So, if you're looking for a quarterback play in the hellscape that is the waiver wire of quarterbacks owned in under 30% of leagues, I think Bryce Young is probably your best play this week.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, similar to Pickett in that they both struggle, but both with new play callers and fresh blood and, good matchups this week. I find it pretty funny, speaking of the Bucs, I find it pretty hilarious that with Tom Brady, they have one of the best defenses. And then when Brady retires, they become one of the worst defenses. Like, why? That makes no sense. Like, why?
Tom Brady motivation, Spencer. Tom Brady willed all of those defenses to help him win Super Bowls.
I mean, it's. I mean, his leadership is undeniable. I mean, him and Drew Brees, definitely, and Peyton Manning. I mean, those guys are just like not only great QBs, but also amazing leaders. Where it seemed like the teams played better, even if they themselves weren't performing as well. So yeah, Bucs are now one of those bottom feeders. Brady's not there anymore. So yeah, take advantage of that this week with Bryce Young. Samaje Perine at running back. He was one I had my eye on.
Yeah, you were talking about bottom feeders, and the Denver Broncos are no longer that, Spencer. They are on the up. If they beat the Texans this week, they will continue to hold the NFL's longest winning streak, and they'll probably be in a playoff spot. So one thing I've looked at is Samaje Perine. We talked a few weeks ago about Javonte Williams, whose game was up, but Samaje Perine has gotten involved a lot more. It was late in drives over the past few weeks, but last week he got involved throughout the game. I believe he's put up back-to-back double-digit weeks, and I think he's really got a role to play going forward in what's now a formidable Broncos team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a huge one this week, Broncos-Texans. I think it's pretty fantasy-friendly there. I think both offenses should do well, and they'll both be motivated because a winner of that will be in prime position to get one of those wild card spots. So, yeah, Samaje a solid play this week. And you got my receiver from last week there. I see Tutu Atwell.
Yeah, as I touched on earlier, the Rams on offense, you and I know you agree, they're fun. They're fantasy friendly, with Sean McVay. They're going to come up with creative ways to spread the ball out. And I think Tutu Atwell, with Cooper Kupp coming in and out of the lineup, with Puka, I had some nagging injuries. I know he's played through them, but Tutu Atwell's really stepped up, and I think he could be another guy this week who continues to step up.
Yeah, possible, because I mean last week it was like Tyler Higbee getting the touchdowns, and then Cup and Puka are both not as involved. I would think they'll both be more involved moving forward, but neither one have that skill set of Tutu as far as being the field stretcher. So, yeah, in the right matchup, I could see him being pretty solid.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and then Cade Otton to round it out.
Yeah, this is another guy I know that you mentioned in the past, and I was lucky enough to get him to dip under 30% here. The only thing slimmer than the field of quarterbacks that are worthy of potential pickups is tight ends. I think the Panthers and the Buccaneers could be, I'm not going to say a shootout because that would not be doing the term justice with those two teams. You know, it'll be an ugly score fest. We'll say that. But I think, you know, Cade Otton, he's really become a weapon for Baker Mayfield in that offense, despite them having a still very, very good receiving core.
Yeah, I can see it. You know, I have him in a league. He was my backup, and it was Hawkinson who was on bye, so I'm glad I kept Otton stash in that league. But yeah, he's rostered in a lot for those that have one of their tight ends on bye or their only tight end on bye. Like me in the listener league, all I have was commit. So I was like, damn, I don't even think Otton's available in the listener league, though. I forgot who I had to dig down for. Oh, yeah, looking at, for those in super deep leagues, Tucker Kraft for the Packers.
Yep.
Now that Luke Musgrave's on IR. So if you're in a really desperate position, look at Kraft. But yeah, most leagues, Cade Otton should be there. Yeah, and it's a good matchup. So I'm with you.
Yeah, you know, just speaking from experience, I've got a few leagues where both my tight ends are on bye. Really didn't look at that. You know, it's most of the leagues where I picked up Isaiah Likely just to kind of back up guys like Hawkinson. So yeah, Tucker Kraft is a guy that I've looked at on waivers, and Cade Otton as well. Those are a few different tight ends. You know, with 6 teams on bye, a few really good tight ends. So these are guys that you can pick up and who can get you some points this week and be a formidable fill-in.
Yeah, because Isaiah Likely's on bye too. You've got the Ravens on bye, so yeah, Likely's out. Then you got the Michael Mayer, he's out. The Raiders on bye. The Giants, well, Waller's hurt, so that doesn't really matter. And then Komet and Hawkinson, the two NFC North teams, are on bye. The Vikings and Bears. And then there's one other one that don't have the list in front of me. I don't know if you know it, Gabe, but the Bills, Dalton Kincaid. That's another starting option. So yeah, it's a lot of tight ends out this week. So yeah, Cade Otton, y'all, go get him because that's one that there's going to probably be other teams going after him. So if you have some fab money left, if you're in a fab league, spend a few. And if you're in just a priority league, I would say, unless you need one of those other skill players, I'd say you could argue that Otton should be a top priority because there's going to be so many other teams fighting to get a tight end this week. So, okay, now we've got some questions piling in. Perfect timing because now we're going to transition back to our live Q&A.
You know, before we jump into these questions, I will say, Josh, I did see your comment saying thanks. We still don't have that trade question from you. Don't know what's up. Maybe try rewording it, but I do want to get to that question.
Yeah, it never showed up on our comments. So hopefully, if you still have it, feel free to get it in here because we got a lot coming in now. Appreciate y'all for being patient and tuning in here on Fantasy Roundup. So got our waivers out the way. Now let's get these questions knocked out. Bryce has one. Would you drop Amari Cooper for Jaden Reed or Brandon Cooks? Ooh, man. That's tough, man, because Cooper being on the Browns with their QB situation, I could understand wanting to drop him. I would probably hold for now, though. I definitely wouldn't for Reed because Watson's starting to emerge there, and then they go have Dobbs. The Packers' offense is too unpredictable. Brandon Cooks, I'd maybe for Brandon Cooks, though. If you need someone for this week, I would maybe do that. I think Cooks is a pretty good play Thursday night against the Seahawks.
Yeah, I would keep an eye on the Amari Cooper injury before dropping him. You know, he finds a way to get the ball, and I think the Browns will continue to get him the ball despite their quarterback situation. So if he doesn't miss much time, I would hold on to him. But I'm going to agree with Spencer and say, yeah, Brandon Cooks, if you need a short-term play, he's definitely the better option here.
And I think the Adam Thielen show is over. Not necessarily, because I mean he's still getting the job done. I think it's over though as far as him being a WR1, but I still think he could be a solid 2 the rest of the way.
Yeah, he's just not getting targets. Frank Reich was being incredibly conservative last week. They threw a lot of, Spencer, as people who watched last night, we saw the Bears throw a lot of wide receiver screens. It seems like the Panthers doubled that amount the other day. I mean, they just were not letting Bryce throw the ball. And so Adam Thielen only had 2 targets. So it's not his fault. He's getting open. I think he'll bounce back, and I think he'll continue to be a strong receiver. But as Spencer said, not a wide receiver 1.
Lamar the GOAT. What's up, man? I traded Kyren earlier week 2 and it paid off for Kyren in week 2. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah. Because if you're able to hold on through his IR stint, now he's looking like a must start. So yeah, good job. You the GOAT, bro. There you go. Caden, what's up, man? Josh Allen buy replacement advice for week 13, please. Available is Stafford, Minshew, Pickett, and Browning. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, Pickett was my recommendation on the waivers, on the waiver segment. Stafford just missed the cut. He was slightly above 30%, and plus they face Cleveland. Myles Garrett might not play though, so if Garrett's out, I'd lean Stafford. Geno going against Dallas probably would stay away from that. I'd probably add like both Stafford and Pickett. And then if Garrett plays, I think that's a big difference there. If Garrett plays or doesn't play, he's like the quarterback of that Browns defense. So if he plays, I would recommend Pickett. But if he doesn't play, I'd recommend Stafford.
I think I'd go Stafford either way. I think they're going to get enough plays on offense to be able to get Stafford some work, especially with now what is a fully healthy supporting cast. So I would lean Stafford either way, in my opinion.
For sure. Yeah, I could see it. Yeah, 12-man PPR. Yeah. I'm in the same boat in our listener league. I'm kind of in this, trying to find a QB replacement because I got Allen, so I didn't have a backup. He's the top scoring QB. So JJ, what's up, man? He's got a question for us. How do we feel about Eckel rest of season? Ooh, I'm not feeling too good, man. I'm glad I traded him in my money league. I mean, if you have him, you kind of have to ride it out. But if there's still trade time, if someone's willing to take him, like thinking he's going to bounce back, I'd probably trade him because I don't see Eckel getting back to the way he was last season. I think he'll still be in PPR like a low-end RB1, but not the high-end RB1 that he was last season because he's just not as explosive.
Yeah, put it this way. I tried to trade for him a few weeks ago in a league when Zack Moss just wasn't getting any touches anymore. And I'm very glad they declined my trade offer because I'm not feeling good about Eckel the rest of the season. I think Brandon Staley is incompetent. It's amazing that he hasn't been fired yet. I've just, I don't understand. Even though he's been hurt, I don't know how they don't utilize him given the touchdown machine that he's been in recent years. So, yeah, I'm avoiding all things Los Angeles Chargers for the rest of the way.
Yeah, that's a team that's fallen apart. Even Justin Herbert is kind of concerning me down the stretch because they've had a lot of injuries. And if Staley thinks he's going to get fired, he might just not give care as much if he knows he's going to get fired. So yeah, definitely worried about that team. Okay, Jake's got one for us here. Olave and A-Chain for Herbert and Amon-Ra. Let me know what Herbert that is.
Trade. I think it's Khalil Herbert. If you can find someone to do that trade, that's highway robbery. I would absolutely do it. I think Amon-Ra is easily the best player in that deal. Plus, we don't know the extent of A-Chan's injury. Olave as well. So, I know Herbert's on bye, but Amon-Ra is such a valuable asset.
Yeah, if it's Justin Herbert, then that's definitely a slam dunk. But even if it's Khalil, I'd probably still do it because, like you said, Gabe, A-Chain. I like A-Chain's upside, but no real sure thing there. And then, Amon-Ra, a huge upgrade over Chris Olave. And Ray said he sadly traded away Barkley and Metcalf for Eckel 2 weeks ago. I mean, it could work for you. I mean, if Eckler's still capable, he could outproduce Barkley. But yeah, Metcalf being in it too, it's odds are against you as far as it being you winning the trade big, but you maybe could break even still.
Yeah, I mean, I think your saving grace is the fact that Barkley's on bye this week and Metcalf has a tough matchup.
So, yeah, I mean, what's done is done. So, I mean, don't beat yourself up. Wasn't a bad deal at the time. And even now, it's not a terrible deal. So, all right, let's get to our best flex. Week 13 best flex, y'all. And I'm going with George Pickens going against the Cardinals. I know sometimes it's kind of tough to find flex plays, especially when you got so many buys like they do this week. But Pickens is someone that you can probably have in your flex spot, considering he's probably on a lot of people's benches with the Steelers offense being so bad this year. But with the new play caller, Pickens seemed to be a little more involved last week. Hopefully he'll have a little more of a stable floor. And we know what kind of ceiling he's got. He's got a very high ceiling. He'll have those blow up games sometimes. And I think this could be one of those, because home against the Cardinals, that you can't get a better matchup than that. So I'm definitely starting Pickens wherever I can. And if he's my flex, I'm really feeling good.
Yeah, it's been a really rocky season for George Pickens and really the Steelers offense in general, as we talked about at length earlier. But yeah, favorable matchup this week. They put up a lot of yards last week, and I think that's only going to continue. You really got to like the Pickens matchup here.
For sure. And so you got Isaiah Pacheco, who, if he's still your flex at this point, I'd say you're doing quite well, because he's someone that's been very solid lately.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to trade for him again. I traded him away for Jalen Hurts and some other guys earlier in the season. Got him back last week. Left him on my bench like an idiot, but I'm not making that mistake this week. He's a guy that should absolutely be in your lineup, just because he's got an increased role. The Chiefs have really, really struggled this year with drops. Other than Kelsey, who hasn't been his same self, they haven't had any real weapons in the passing game. Rashee Rice has shown flashes, but the one person that's been a consistent for them is Isaiah Pacheco, and he had 2 touchdowns last week. I'm not going to expect him to replicate that every week, but as long as he continues to get touches, he's definitely worth a play, because he is the playmaker in that Chiefs offense. Everyone's so worried about Mahomes, but Pacheco is a guy who can really do damage.
Yeah, because he's been running hard lately. Like, people kind of make fun of the way he runs, but it's effective. I mean, he runs like a man possessed, and that's. I mean, it might not be the best long-term running style, but for now, I mean, we're just wanting someone for right now. And I mean, for right now in fantasy, Pacheco's very reliable, especially with Jerick McKinnon banged up. He's getting basically all the touches there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a very much an afterthought there in KC. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, and someone I talked about earlier, obviously we only have one best flex each. I think Kyren Williams is also someone who, if you've already got your running back spots filled out, which I assume most people with Kyren still on their roster do, definitely throw Kyren Williams here at your flex this week.
Right. Yeah, same with Zack Moss. I mean,
Yeah.
I was going to put him in here, but we already discussed him at length earlier, so I figured I'd go with Pickens, show him some love. So, but yeah, that's our best flexes. Comment your best flex if you have one. But before we sign off here, I got a few more questions. So our last minute Q&A is underway. Caden has a tight end question for us. Freiermuth or Taysom, sub for Hawkinson. Fryer plays Cardinals. Taysom plays Lions.
Definitely Freiermuth. I don't even think that's much of a question. I know Taysom Hill's just too unpredictable. I know you mentioned earlier he's going to get some looks with the Saints receiving corps then, but I like Freiermuth. He came back last week and he looked like himself from last season.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the Cardinals defense is kind of a matchup thing. The Cardinals defense really bad against the tight end position. So, I mean, I say I like Pickens, but Freiermuth was the one that really benefited from that new play caller. I mean, he had by far his best game of the year last week. So, with that factored in along with the matchup, yeah, I'd probably go his way, because Taysom, like you said, Gabe, just too sporadic, and the matchup is tough. Detroit's got a really good run defense, so it'll probably be tough for Taysom to grind out yards on the ground. So I'll lean Freiermuth. Saquon, should I trade Saquon for Zack Moss? Nah, I'd hold Saquon. Saquon is the face of the Giants. I mean, he is all they've got, really. And even though defense is keying on him, he still puts up numbers. I mean, and he can catch passes. Him and DeVito. Seems like DeVito is at least smart enough to target Saquon. And they run it with him a lot. He's their best player. So don't overthink this. I know it's tempting to want to go for Moss. I mean, he's back. There's a lot of hype surrounding him with JT out, but I'd stand pat with Saquon.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I know Saquon didn't have his best week last week. I know he's on a bad team and he's on a bye this week, but as we touched on earlier, Zack Moss might only be there for 2 weeks, maybe 3, unless they lose all those games. So I still like Saquon. He's still the play for me.
Agreed. So that was from Aiden. Appreciate you, Aiden. Aiden, Caden, Ray Gamer, Jake, Bryce, JJ, and Lamar the Goat, Josh. Oh, yeah, Josh, if it's the last call, bro. Last call.
Can always hit us up on social media too. We've got our social media here. So
yeah,
even though we've had those technical difficulties getting your trade question in, feel free to hit us up. We'll always be happy to answer those for you.
Cool. All right. So, well, I guess with that being said, we'll put a bow on this one. Any final thoughts, Gabe?
No, just, good luck to everyone this week. Hopefully you're able to get your waiver claims with a lot of those teams on bye. So if, as I just mentioned, it doesn't just go for Josh. If anyone's got questions, Spencer and I are here to help. This is a tricky week to navigate in fantasy. So.
Yeah, well said, bro. Well said. So we'll end on that note. Thank you for everyone that tuned in. Couldn't do it without y'all. We'll be back next week to recap week 13, preview week 14, which I know a lot of y'all have playoffs starting up. So yeah, this is it, y'all. This is the stretch. This is the fun times for those that have made it this far. I appreciate y'all. And yeah, this is where it gets fun. So yeah, so those that have stick it out year after year, y'all know the drill. So yeah, it's gonna be another fun year. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this one. For Gabe Henderson, this is Spencer the Guru Urquhart. Thank y'all again for watching Fantasy Roundup here on the Bayou Bets YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again, y'all. Peace out.